Hey everyone, I'd like to talk a little bit today about jazz comping. Comping is short for accompanying, and it usually means playing chords in support of something else. Of course, drummers and bass players can comp too, but on a chordal instrument it usually means playing chords in support of some other thing. What I want to do with this video today is help us start to see how we can expand our comping a little bit past the basics. Many guitar players, when we first start to learn jazz chords, we might learn, say, two different shapes for a major 7. One of them might be this, G major 7, and one of them might be this. So we have these two different shapes, and it can be hard to see, well, okay, I have this. What am I going to do? Just learn more chord voicings? Sure. But how can we start to expand and maybe see a bigger picture? That's what I want to talk about in this video today. Really, there are 5 different types of 7th chords. We have major 7ths, dominant 7ths, minor 7s, minor 7 flat 5s, and diminished 7s. I'm not going to talk about diminished chords today. They're a little bit different than the other ones and kind of a complicated subject, or they can be anyway. So we're just going to put them aside for a minute and talk about the other 4 types. So here's the idea that we're going to be thinking about today. If we look at this larger G major 7 shape, and we look at what's happening on the middle 2 strings, we have the 7 and the 3, the 7th and the 3rd of the chord. That's great because the 3rd and 7th are the 2 most important notes in determining a chord's quality or sound. So it's nice to have those in the voicing. And then we're going to have one extra note, usually above that. If we look at the way that this is working, we see we have the 7th and 3rd here. Then we can also come up here and get them on these 2 strings. Now this is not the middle 2 strings, but they're there, and then we have room for another note in between, or we can also play them here. Now these are the same 2 notes as these, but it gives us a few more options. So 3 places. And these are all just major 7s, G major 7. Now what we're going to do for each of these 4 chord types, we're going to move up these strings and find some different voicings, and most of the voicings will have a 3rd and a 7th in them. So that should give us a pretty cool sound. So let's talk about the voicings. We're going to start with the major 7. And we're going to do these all in G because that just puts us in a nice part of the guitar, I think. So our first voicing is, and our top note is the 3rd of the scale here. So that's a nice sounding chord. Then right away we get into a little bit of trouble because the next note that we have on top is a C, which is the 4th of the scale. It's always hard to have a 4 on top of a chord if it's a major chord. It's kind of an avoid tone. It's something that we don't really want to lean on too much. So I'm actually harmonizing this with a D7 sound here. So not technically a G major chord, but it can be something of a passing chord to get us on to the next shape. Then we're just going to have this, which is of course part of this G major 7 that I think we all know and love. Then we go on to here. Again, we're just moving the top note up here mostly. We still have the 3rd and 7th in this chord. Then we move up to here, and we're on to these different 3rds and 7ths, 3 and 7 here on the outside. Our next voicing is here. This is a little bit of a crunch. Harmonizing the root on top, it's interesting what our options are. We could put a 6 below that and soften it up a little bit, but let's go ahead and have this crunch. It's a nice sound, a little dissonant, but very cool. And we still have the 3rd and the 7th in our chord here. Here's the next one. For this next voicing, I think we have a couple of options. This is pretty cool, or we could use this same shape that we started the thing with. But let's go with this one, I think. And then we're going to finish this off. Now we're going to go ahead and bring the A string in. Why not? It's high enough. We can get some 4-note shapes here. Again, we have to harmonize this C note on top, which is the 4th, which is a little problematic. So this is kind of an A minor 7 sound. And then we just move that all up, and we have our final G major 7 type sound. So any one of these chords could work for G major 7, or you could move through all of them and kind of set up a G major sounding tonality. Let's run through them one more time. Our next chord type is dominant sevens, like a G7. Here we're going to run through the same sort of sequence, but these are all going to be G7 chords, or chords that can work as G7. So we're starting out with, it's a lot like the one in the major 7, except our F sharp has come down to be an F. If we want, we could also play this. This has a 9 in it rather than a root. Equally good. So, is our next chord. I had to think about that for a second. Again, we run into some of the same trouble here. We have a C on top, which is not a great note on a G7 chord. It's the 4. So we're harmonizing it with this. Now we've switched to where we have our 3rd and our 7th. And then we're switching again. And ending up with a 4-note chord. Again, I'm bringing in the low A string just because it's high enough now that this is not a low enough note that will get us in trouble. So let's run through that sequence one more time. Top. So all of those are G7s, and you just want to learn this sequence, and then your chord voicings you're gonna have a lot more different options. Now we get to the minors. So this is G minor 7 now that we're looking at. On a minor chord, the 4 is not a problem anymore. It's we could call it an allowable tension or an available tension. It's not a dissonant note anymore. You can have a 4 on a minor chord without breaking any of the rules. So, that's our first voicing. Then this, which is certainly part of that kind of shape. Then, this is an interesting note. I'm going to play the natural 6 on top here. This is a crunchy sound. And the reason for that is because these 2 outer notes are a major 7th interval, which is a crunchy kind of dissonant sound. But this is not a voicing to be afraid of. It's really good. It's nice to have in our spice drawer when it's time to make these choices. If you don't want something quite that strident, you can also harmonize this like that. Also very good. These are both nice G minor voicings. Then we're going to go on here. And then we move up here. So we have the root on top here. Root, flat 7, flat 3. Now here we're going to switch to 4-note voicings. And I just think these last 3 chords are kind of special. Some of you may have seen these before. These are, if you've ever studied a tune like So What, or something that's a modal tune, often we learn these 4th-based voicings, where what you have here is a stack of 4ths, which gives us a modern sound. Interesting. So all of these are just notes out of G Dorian, which is G minor with a natural 6. So running through all these again. And finally, we get to minor 7, flat 5. Right out of the gate, I want to start with an interesting voicing here. This voicing that we played in the minor 7s also works well for minor 7, flat 5, but it doesn't have a flat 5 in it, which actually isn't a problem. But if you want to have a flat 5 in it, this would be one way to do it. This kind of looks like a D flat major chord. interestingly, but we're using it as a G chord. Really beautiful, I think. So, I don't know, this does break our pattern a little bit, but I think it's really expanding to learn to see this and hear this as G minor 7 flat 5. You know, just as an aside, a lot of this is getting used to playing a chord that doesn't have the root on the bottom and looking at it and saying, huh, this is a G? It's an interesting process that we go through to start to learn that, to not need the root on the bottom just to be comfortable playing it. Interesting. So, okay, we start with that. Then our next one is, and this is part of a familiar shape, I think. Then we have this, which, that's interesting to me that that can function as a G minor 7 flat 5, but it sure can. This, I guess, is a flat 6 on top, which is part of the Locrian mode that this is coming from, so a little bit of theory in there. Then we have this. This just looks like a B flat minor chord, which it turns out is the same thing as G minor 7 flat 5. We don't have time to go too deep into all of this theory here, but that is definitely G minor 7 flat 5. Moving on. I'm using a natural 9 there, which is a great sound. Now these last two are going to be kind of special to me. 4-note voicings. Again, we're high enough that I think bringing in the A string is not going to make this bad. What we have here is flat 5, flat 7, natural 9, and 11. It's a stack of great notes. And then the last thing we're going to play is going to look like B flat minor 6, but it's functioning as a G chord here, G minor 7 flat 5. Okay, we're going to run through all of those. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today. That's a whole lot of chord voicings. My recommendation would be to get to where you can play those up and down, just get used to the way that they feel. Once you've done all this, it may still feel like you're a little ways away from being able to use them all in actual tunes, but the first step is getting them under your fingers and getting the sounds into your ear also, and starting to see how that works. So I hope that this is interesting and useful. Please leave me any comments about anything that you might not have understood or that needs clarification, or anything that worked for you or that didn't. I'm always looking for feedback and ideas to improve these videos and make stuff that's useful for you guys. So please do leave a comment, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do subscribe to my channel because there's lots more stuff to come. Thank you guys for listening and tuning in. We'll see you next time.